You made it. It is almost to cocktails, and what we're going to be doing here is we're going to have a conversation on design leadership with a few of my friends up here. It'll be a panel discussion once again. But before we do that, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'll be the moderator, and also just a little bit about why this session is so important for everybody in the room. My name is Adam Fry-Pierce. I'm the Director of Design Community at InVision. Thank you all so much for coming. And over the last few years, what I've done with most of my time is spent it helping launch and manage design education initiatives such as designbetter.co and designleadership.com, which I think there's actually a couple Design Leadership Forum members in here tonight, which is really cool. Good to see you guys. But probably the coolest opportunity that I've had is to be able to sit down with over 1,000 design leaders to date at in-person experiences like workshops and fireside chats and town hall meetings and dinners. And these haven't been bite-sized conversations, they've been really long conversations. It's been really cool. So I've had the opportunity to just kind of see how the folks up here, how they look at the world, how they're growing their teams, since there's more design need today more than ever, and teams are growing. And more than anything, it's been really interesting to see all the patterns that are connecting all design leaders around the world, specifically in the challenges that they're trying to, or that they're facing. One of the biggest punchlines, something that's so important for everybody here in the room, is that most of these design leaders in any industry, at any type of business, anywhere in the world, are really saying the same thing. And that's that design is being tasked with solving more business problems today than ever before. There's more design need in the world. There's more need for designers and for design thinkers everywhere. Which is really cool. There's a ton of opportunity for designers as well as design leaders in the room. But where this becomes critically important for us is that there's not really a playbook for especially the leaders at the front of those teams as to how to answer the call. Like if a CEO is coming to the design department and saying, hey, we really want to make design a core strategy for growth over the next 5 years. We want to make design the differentiator for us. Design leaders, for the most part, kind of a surprise for me when I was having all these conversations, were just winging it, as if they were kind of creating the playbook on their own, since there is no really standard way to respond to the call. And that's why community is so important, and that's why moments like this are really important, where if we all get together, we have a chance to just ask straight from the source, hey, for the leaders that are in front of some of these teams, how are you going about your day-to-day? What tips and tricks can you provide for all of us here in the audience? So that's what we're going to do. We asked 3 different design leaders from 3 different inspiring brands right here in the FinTech space who are having a global impact with their work to come up here and just share the stage with us for about 30, 45 minutes. I've got some questions that I'm going to be asking them, and then just like the other panel, we're actually going to be taking questions from the audience. So about halfway through, you'll see some of the questions that you're going to be submitting pop up on screen. Just like before, if you see something that's really interesting, vote it to the top, and we'll make sure that we get to it at the end. So for now, we are going to welcome Mr. James Reeves over here from Foolproof, my friend Jesse Lewis at HSBC, and Alberta, I'm going to butcher your last name. Soranzo. Beautiful last name. It sounds much more beautiful coming from her mouth than mine. Please go ahead and give us a welcome of applause for our panelists today, and we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, so perhaps the best place to start is just getting to know who is up here. And rather than having me read off a CV, I figured that we'd just do story time. So maybe in like a 60, 120-second story, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, James, and what you're doing in your current role?
Sure. Who remembers the kid in class who would always ask why? Like, why? That was me. So luckily, I think my journey has led me into the world of design, where asking why a lot is totally acceptable. I have no idea what I'd have done if I didn't fall into design. I suppose my journey through design led me to education, to actually study HCI, way before UX was a thing. So I think my design background has very much been from a human-centered point of view, and I'm kind of now in the position at Foolproof as creative director, where I oversee our design and development studio to ensure that what we design and make is actually relevant and usable by people.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. You didn't exist when I started. I was recently qualified as a design granddad because I've been doing this for 30 years. So watch out. Your profession might change or not be invented yet. So I started out as a printmaker, ended up working in various media companies, Disney. So I've gone from Disney, a truly Mickey Mouse company, to being a global design lead in a FinTech one. And it's still the same problems. And most of those problems and most of those opportunities are just people. And it's making it work well for them.
I don't know what to say after this. I mean, I'm going to be a massive letdown. So I actually did not train as a designer. I stumbled upon it after working in communication, working in education, traveling the world, living in 3 continents, which explains why my surname is unpronounceable and my accent is always wrong, irrespective of where I am. But effectively, I fell in love with how people use things, which is my imprinting, and this idea that I get paid to take things apart and put them back together in a way that works better is like going to Disneyland. So here I am.
Awesome. Well, great. Now that we know a little bit about who's up here, perhaps the best place to start is what the difference is between management and leadership, since we're having a kind of a broad conversation on leadership. Jesse, you and I were talking a little bit backstage in the green room about what some of those differences might be. If you were to sum it up, what's the big takeaway? What's the difference between management and leadership?
So I think it was touched on by Louise in her talk earlier around management. For me, management is around, I suppose the operational aspects of what you do, ensuring that you're setting the right culture, the right environment to do the work, and all the things that go around it. I suppose leadership for me is about, inspiring and affecting positive change. So not being a maverick and saying do this and go and do it. It's around helping to foster, a culture of ideas and innovation, but also giving people the freedom to go and kind of learn and experiment as they go. So for me, leading is not necessarily about leading, alone from the front. It's about leading and bringing your team on that journey with you.
Awesome. And I did say Jesse, but I meant James. And Jesse, do you want to add some color to that?
I think it's about being humble. It's about clearing the way for people. Even though I might be a leader, there is no way you want me designing anything anymore. I'm too far removed from it. I'm about creating capability for other people, about creating opportunity for them to solve the problems of today. Even if some people in the last panel didn't think we could behave like a startup, there are clever ways of working, and it's my job to make sure we can do those.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think that, James and Jesse clearly outlined what the difference is, paperwork versus opportunity. I think that the real opportunity for leadership is not just in taking the teams that you have with you, but also in taking the rest of the organization, big or small, and creating a connection between that thinking power and the actual outcomes that will make people, to the point of the previous panel, adopt and believe and follow the things and trust the thing that you do. So leadership goes beyond our immediate sphere of influence.
I love that. Cool. Okay, so let's maybe dive into some misnomers of design leadership. I'm not sure if anybody wants to take a crack at this, but there might be a lot of people in the audience who are interested in jumping into people management roles, or they're an emerging design leader, or perhaps they just want to take a more distinct design leadership position in the next few years. What's something that you spend a lot of time on now that maybe you didn't anticipate that you'd be spending time on? Where's like the most important energy going that you just didn't expect that you'd be putting it?
Well, before that, when someone comes to me and says, I want to progress in my career, the first question I ask is why? What is it that you want? And you quickly differentiate who's in it, because they see an opportunity to make a progression, which means a bigger title, a higher salary, et cetera, but it's the people that tell you, actually, I have all of this idea and I want to help other people feel free to express this, to create new things and to develop new ideas. Those are the people that that are really exciting. Not that you shouldn't invest on everybody, you should, absolutely, but that's the main difference. So you can be a leader irrespective of a title. If people believe in you, if people appreciate what you do and the freedom that you give, you're already a leader, irrespective of whether you manage. Unfortunately, or fortunately, in organizations, leadership often comes with management. So the thing that for me is it's not what I wasn't expecting, but one of the pain points is the bloody paperwork.
The bloody paperwork.
That comes with it.
A lot of head nods.
Yes.
The end of year review for 222 people. It's a killer.
Wow.
Oh, we just got rid of them.
Oh, I just have career envy now. Can I take that next?
Yeah.
The thing I didn't expect to do is the number of one-to-ones. I spend an absolute fortune on coffee and have a real shaky problem. Because as a design lead, people's careers are so important to them, and people now bring a lot of complexity, because in a modern world of ownership, the one thing you really own is your own brand, your own labels, your own title. And it doesn't always equate to salary. It doesn't always equate to charging for it. It's about that breadth of education you can get. You can have someone who's working on one product, but they need to be more rounded by engaging with another team, with another kind of set of challenges. And it's how you create that opportunity for them. It's on the flip side, as a leader, being a leader sometimes doesn't come with being responsible for people. It comes with being responsible for opinions and education. So you're very often talking at the top table to why they should adopt new modes of practice, why they should engage in new ways with information, where they might lose or win. It's about entertaining risk and taking those risks with a certain amount of courage. And then that just adds a dimension of being humble. You're not always going to be right. You have to look after all those people who are obsessed about how they're perceived. You have to look after those leaders who are worried about the bottom line. And you have to find a way of, as a leader, bringing that all together in such a way that we can move forward and gain a certain amount of momentum.
I think I'd add to that, in terms of being humble, I think there was a key moment for me when, this sounds really arrogant, I realised that people weren't like me, that, in terms of the people I love, I'm very direct to the point, kind of a get things done type person, and recognising that not necessarily everybody in the team likes to work that way. Some designers you can go up to and say, that's rubbish, start again. Whereas some you go, I really like what you've done there, and you have to go for about 20 minutes all around the houses to say what you actually think, obviously with critiques and doing it all the right way and not just being as direct as I just said. I'm working on it. But I think for me, recognising that people are different and they approach things differently was the moment that made me realise that, I probably need to change my style and adapt to be a little bit more humble, and to allow people to, I suppose certainly designers, solve the problems themselves, not go in and with experience and start jumping in and telling them how to do things, but recognising the differences across the team to let them flourish in their own way, because diversity and all that kind of stuff and what we do is really, really, really powerful, and in the teams it's certainly for me that a key strength that I'd like to foster.
Yeah, I think you guys made me think about something. So to the point of being humble, I think the amount of self-awareness that it takes to be in a position of leadership, I find absolutely staggering. We see each other, we see ourselves as normal people, right? We go home, we have a family, we go to the doctor. But in organizations, especially when they are super hierarchical, the higher you up in the hierarchy, the more you're not seen as a human being. And being aware of the perception, which is not reality, but being aware of how we are perceived, of how people might be scared to talk to you when you are in a position of perceived power I think is fundamental, again, in building that relationship of trust with the teams with the people that you work with, not necessarily just your teams, but also people in other teams.
That distance that artificially grows between you and other people. I've spent the last 3 years growing in capability. When it hit around 123 people, I couldn't remember everybody's name anymore. I couldn't remember the individual backstories for people in Hong Kong and Americas. And that was a real struggle. I found that quite upsetting when I walked up to people and was like, oh God, who are you? That's an awful place to be. And it's great when people understand you, but you have to be accessible. You have to make sure that everyone knows who you are, and no one is too grand, too small, too junior, too inexperienced, too new, too old to come and find you for a coffee and a chat. It's so important to have those conversations, because as a leader, it makes me more effective. I actually find out what's going on through a lot of surprising coffees and chats.
Is that surgical then? Do you make sure to have coffee and chats organically, or do you set these one-on-ones on walking?
No, I have a couple of Rottweilers that sit next to me and try and keep people at bay. One's called Joe, one's called Adam, and they can you see him on his headphones. No, I think it's about being available, and as people begin to understand your routine, they find ways of fitting around it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. If there's nothing else?
No, that's good.
Awesome. Cool. We'll keep marching forward. So you touched on something earlier, which was really interesting. We brushed by it, and it was you had changed your reporting structure. I think, as you said, that you got rid of reviews.
Well, so we've been looking, and this is an effort that's been going on in the organization for the last year. So we've been looking at how how we can best support our colleagues to adopt different ways of working if we continue to look at their performance as an exercise that happens twice a year and has very little connection with the reality of the day-to-day, because people do not perform twice a year, but they're supposed to do something every day. And so some do, some don't, but so we've been looking at different ways of to facilitate that connection between contributors, between management, create a real connection between the things that you're expected to do and the opportunities that are afforded to you by the organization. So we have a very solid framework around how we talk about performance, but if anything, we've created more opportunities to talk and discuss about how things are going, rather than sticking to that.
It's really interesting because at a lot of the meetups that we've been going to recently, and just sitting down with, Jesse, you've been to several of them. Something that comes up is something that when the question gets asked to a group of 30 design leaders, what's the one thing that you wish that every single designer in the room would have? It would be communicating the value of design, selling the value of design, probably pumping up a lot of the business skills, which might not resonate as much to this room here, considering the industry that you're in. I think that speaking the language of business probably comes naturally to a lot of people in this room, but it is something that we hear over and over again, right? So kind of segueing into, eventually I would love to learn a little bit more about reporting structure, but as far as overall communication and framing of the word design, especially to some of our colleagues in marketing and accounting and legal, what tips and tricks do you have for this room as far as just how to best communicate what design means? It's such a squishy term and it means so much to so many different people. Let's start there and then we'll kind of drill down.
For me, it's really, really easy. And this is not anything that's no one's thought about. It's about making tangible artifacts that reflect the value of it. I think when we have PowerPoint decks that show strategy and ideas and words and diagrams and kind of bar charts and pie charts, to say how the impact of doing this thing or this product or this proposition will go, not until you make an artifact that you can put into people's hands in terms of client stakeholders, users, does it really start to show what can be done. Now, that doesn't mean you need to do this thing for months and months and months and months. You can make anything quick and dirty, kind of quick prototypes or things that bring to life the idea, whether that be in video, it doesn't really matter. And I think certainly at Foolproof, we kind of create a lot of proof of concepts. It's something that's worked well for us, because in order to unlock that huge budget to build it for real, it's nice to make something quick and dirty that gives at least a vision for what that could be. Now, the vision of what it could be will probably be watered down. There'll be, performance things, other requirements, things that no one thought about when you go to production, very much kind of a proof of concept car. It's the lovely curve at the back that's beautifully designed. Is going to be a straight line when it goes to production, because that costs millions and millions of pounds to put in. So for us, creating kind of an artifact to kind of get excitement, engagement, and evidence with users is probably the key way. That's one way.
Jesse, I feel like
I'm
you're
going to upset people.
Please.
I once had to lecture the upper management, who were giving me lots and lots of feedback that I didn't actually want. And the way I differentiated it was that my team were the designers, and they were a set of very informed opinions. I welcomed their opinion, but it was an opinion. In a sense, you have a set of designers who come from a diverse range of backgrounds, bring a lot of creative ideas. And then you have someone who's consuming it and hasn't had the same investment as that designer, who's going, but I don't like it, I want it in blue. Oh, I lost my job at Sky because I argued about blue. Anyway, you have to manage that. You have to be very consultative. And I think that's when design becomes very malleable. I've worked with someone who was an archaeologist. I have 2 master carpenters in my team at the moment. I have several psychologists who are designers. I have a lapsed chef who's a designer. There are people who have a passion to make things, to create, who are using these technologies to release these experiences that respond to customers, which is really good. And you have to make sure that you are clear in articulating what they're doing when the audience says, but I don't like it. You have to qualify that with data, with conversation, in an articulate way that brings them on board, and that's the risk. If you leave design squishy, we all become very emotional and quite fluffy. It's building some containers and some definition around it.
So I should clarify what I mean when I mean design. What I mean when I say design.
Sure.
Because design for us at Lloyd's is a set of competencies that are not just limited to what traditionally is seen as design, like research, interaction design, prototyping, et cetera, we have some more science-based disciplines, systems thinking, service design, et cetera, that are all part of what design is. So if I look at the value of design as I understand it, and if I look at the concept of value for my internal stakeholders, our board, our C-suite, et cetera, we come from two completely different worlds. And like Dwayne and Jason were talking about, not only you are in a siloed environment, but you've got two completely different tribes that are coming together, speaking a different language, dressing differently, and more even traditional organizations are bringing in people like us that show up in jeans, etc., and look different and may have tattoos, and you've got a crew that grew up on suits and cufflinks and heels. And it pains me to say it, but oftentimes it's the designers who are arrogant. We rock into these environments saying, we're right, we understand, you don't get it, you're a dinosaur. Not that we say it openly, but we say it with our own actions, with our own attitude. So on one hand, it's a missed opportunity between these wealth of experience that we're not absorbing because we're antagonistic. And again, we don't do it on purpose. It's just a matter of, what we do outside when we're not in financial institutions. But we also miss to connect with them, to communicate effectively. And like I always tell my daughters, does it matter whether you're right? So my daughters speak 3 languages, and sometimes they're hesitant about speaking in Italian or speaking in Spanish because their primary language is English. But is it more important that you're absolutely right, or is it important that the other person understands you? And so for me, communicating the value of design starts with translating what we do in a language that my audience can understand.
Right.
So it's all about explaining what we do, to your point, explaining how it happens, why it looks so different, but always tying it up to an actual concept that my audience can relate to. And that's irrespective. I think it's particularly important in finance, but it's irrespective of the sector you're in. When I was working in the States in government at the Center for Disease Control, I had you were speaking of artifacts, James. I had a stakeholder who, one of the first meetings, we were showing him wireframes, and in his mind, wireframes became chicken wire. So he said, oh my God, these chicken wires are amazing, and can you make them click? For 18 months, we talked about chicken wire, the word wireframes, in emails, in official documents somewhere in Maryland and in Washington. There is chicken wire for 18 months. Ultimately, it didn't matter. We delivered the thing, we all spoke the same language, we developed this sort of complicity over a thing that was silly. The value we delivered was exactly the same.
Beautiful. Wow. Chicken wire.
Chicken wire.
I am so changing it when I go back.
Yeah, it can be our team name. Chicken wire, right?
The chicken wire panel.
Yes.
There's a subtler thread to that, which is through all of that, you were talking about how much you listen to people. It's not just about the education.
That's my superpower.
Oh, no, sorry. Okay, stop. Save that for the next question. But listening is key.
It is. You're right. You're absolutely right. Just not bearing people with words like I'm doing right now, but also listening.
Okay, so moving on. Just be mindful of time. This actually rolls pretty well into the next thread, which is we talked about communicating the value of design. We talked about listening and how that's a superpower of yours, apparently. But as far as 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 design continues to move in longitude and latitude, continues to grow in size and report more and more directly to the C-suite, I think it is more and more important when the design leader, ultimately at the top, has that key metric ready for the CEO, who might come at any point and say, how are we doing on this dashboard, or how are we doing on this key point? Which I see smiles, because I think that this resonates. Maybe that is something that's in your world right now, Jesse. But the thing that I wanted to ask you directly is, what are you, like, how are you reporting on the business impact of your work? And I'm really curious on performance metrics, if anyone here subscribes to OKRs. If you do, how are you tying that to larger business OKRs and larger business objectives? As far as like speaking the language of business and reporting on the actual work, what is the top line metrics and what frameworks are you using to best have that conversation with your business counterparts?
Well, I think before I answer that question, or try to in part, I suppose it's where we're in now in terms of user experience. We used to get away with saying that we'll make it better, and clients are now saying, yeah, but how much? How many more of those things will they buy? How many people will get through the funnel, etc. I think the metrics and measurement of kind of the work we do is integral to kind of speak the business language. So I think for us, you touched on OKRs. It's at the moment, actually, at Foolproof, we kind of redefining our vision and mission, and using OKRs as the framework to set essentially a set of objectives that are measurable in order to then cascade down to our team. Mm-hmm. So in terms of doing that for clients, I think that's something that we'll certainly start to explore. We're kind of looking inwards at ourselves at the moment to ensure that we're kind of doing the things the right way before we tell other people how to do them.
A lot of teams say that they do OKR, and they don't.
Mm-hmm. There's different.
They hit the objective,
yeah,
but
exactly.
Yeah, anyways, sorry. I'm not sure if you said you were going internally before you're working.
Yeah, because I think we want to make sure that if we, with all things that you try and kind of in our industry, it's good to try and practice what you preach generally. And I think the kind of these OKRs as a framework is a really good way to ensure that we're actually defining objectives as a business that are tangible and measurable. So the tangibility of an objective is really key. An objective shouldn't really be measured just by a series of underlying metrics that no one understands.
Yeah.
An objective should be, set up an office based in another location. Do we have a physical office in another location doing great work? Yes, we do. That is a key, visible, not underlined, measurable thing that shows that you've met that objective. So I think in terms of the impact you can use with OKRs with clients, it's, again, to get something that everybody across the organization understands that it's been done, not just by a group over here or a group over here. It needs to be, like I say, tangible is the key thing for me.
Okay. If Jesse, I'm not sure if, and Alberta, I'm not sure if you can speak to your reporting metrics, but is OKR, does that something?
My boss just came into the room. I can't speak about anything anymore. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I can speak, of course. I think the OKRs are really, really difficult to get right, especially in large organizations where the measurement framework, the traditional measurement framework is really different.
Sure.
And it does start with, like James was saying, accountability and this ability to stop and think and reflect and be bold in your approach to change. I don't think I can get into the details, but our design team is actually instrumental in helping the organization shape our approach to that.
And that was kind of the point of the question is like, how did you set those up, right? Because there's a lot of people, especially like new managers, that will reach out within the forum in particular and say, hey, can you connect me to somebody who's done this? Because I am going to be the first VP of UX or the first head of design, and I want to figure out how to really make a mark, because there's a lot riding on that first position, right? Like they have to prove that they can speak the language of business directly to a board that traditionally has not been able to measure design in the way that every other function is, right? Mm-hmm. Marketing and accounting, and engineering. But for design, it's like, well, what is the thing? And so a lot of the questions that we've been getting asked in the forum is, can you connect me to somebody who's successfully been able to meet with another business counterpart, whoever they're rolling up into, and set up OKRs that go beyond just the design group, right? Mm-hmm. Measuring up to the important quarterly or annual objectives. And I think the point of the question is like, do you reach out? Do you wait to be reactive for that? Is it, in your experience, have you had a lot of success in taking initiative and just going to ask those questions? so that from the very beginning you are on the same page and maybe not so reactive and potentially set up for failure later?
Yeah, sorry, Jesse. I suppose OKR specifically no, but in terms of measurable impact of our work, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if it's just one core metric, whether it's an NPS score, whether it's someone clicking on that button, to have something that is measurable to see the impact of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be anything that's overly complex. It can literally be a completion of a journey to start, and then you can build out from then. But yeah, for us, I think how we work, if we can't prove that it's worked, then how do we know? So we'll ensure we're kind of defining those metrics from the outset.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes you can't find the person who knows where some data actually lives, and often there isn't any. So I think at least trying to start a baseline, or at least having a period of time where you can get that data to see the improvement on is something that we always insist on.
Awesome.
Deciding what to measure, rather than being in a culture of measure everything, which is where I think we are now. Data is this new currency, and we're forgetting that these are product that and experiences we create and design for people. On an individual basis, you can ask me about some data, but I'd go to my leadership because they have very specific and individual targets to meet. Some of those targets, some of those KPI are as simple as delivery on time, and the success metrics, we don't achieve by ourselves. They're in collaboration, product managers, BAs, developers, engineers, a whole community of people who help realize the bank's ambition. And then it's a case of understanding how that's been successful for our customer base in the market. Where did the abandonment go? How many logons were there? And if there are issues, it's addressing them quickly. I think it's more about a very human and accountable response to metrics than it is perhaps to targets now.
Awesome. Cool.
It is, and I think to Jesse's point, I think that our biggest responsibility, and this is where I think personally the team I'm part of is doing a great job, is in helping the business, and as we saw in the previous panel, this type of business, large financial institutions tend to have technical debt, be encumbered by siloed mentalities, etc., but helping understand the connection between decision-making points and points of impact inside the organization and outside the organization for our clients is what designers are really is the most important unit of measure that as designers we're responsible to support. And we're doing it. It's really difficult because there's nothing quite as you were talking about being humble. There's nothing that makes you feel quite as humble as having to say, wait a second, I believe this, but now that you've made me see this other reality and the possibilities, I'm willing to change on the back of that. But that's our job, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm not a hypocrite, I'm inconsistent.
Aren't we all?
Awesome. We've got just 10 more minutes left. Can we throw the questions up on the monitor here of group questions, and take a second, log on and upvote whatever ones you want to do. Before we ask those, I'm going to do a lightning round so that everyone here has a chance to possibly upvote one more. Let's just go with really quick, 30 seconds across. What is a piece of advice you'd like to give to all new design leaders in the room right now?
Wow. I'm just going to look that way. We going this way along?
Whoever wants to jump in.
Go for it.
Me? Oh.
No. Just that's the advice. Go for it. Just giving. It's not about giving advice. It's helping people see that they have permission to go and try.
Or that you don't need permission.
Yes, yeah. But some people, especially in large organization, it's a permission-based model. Sure. It's a risk management permission-based model. Just when you go to your team and tell them, you know what, from today on, just go and do it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we'll have learned something. Is the best thing you can do, I think.
Yeah, challenge. Don't be complacent. The biggest risk is not learning from a mistake you might make. So, take the risks. And remember to bring your passion to work. You enjoy it. We're all doing this because we enjoy it on some level.
Yeah, I probably had to just the right attitude. I think the best people I've ever worked with have the right attitude and drive, to both of these points, to just affect change. If you wait to be given permission, you'll never get anywhere. So just have the right attitude and drive to affect change. I think that's key.
I think that's been true for all three of these pieces. If you look at like the most successful teams right now, especially in fintech and particularly tech in general, the leaders at the front of those teams really subscribe to all three of those pieces, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's not about being reckless. I mean, to be clear, it's not about being reckless, but if you think about the constraints within which we work, regulation, risk, etc., they actually can inspire us to be a lot more creative than if we had a blank slate. So it's about respecting the environment that we chose to play in, but at the same time trying to do something different.
Yeah, like being bold, political, and curious. Right?
I fail on the political, but...
Okay, so we got a couple questions coming in here. The first one is, how do you keep designers motivated at Big Bank when there are so many cool startups in London? How do you recruit? How do you keep?
Work for a cool bank. I think when you talk about startups, I was listening to the last panel. It was an exciting conversation. But I think for banks, the maturity of the team we have, whilst we haven't solved every problem yet, I think we all recognise that we're not a startup. So as a large, complex team, we look inwards and we look now at how do we hothouse? How do we create opportunities for small groups of individuals to develop product that can change the competitive landscape? Those teams will become our startups. Those teams that we nurture, those teams that we kind of ring fence and defend from senior management saying, why isn't this resource doing this? Those are the teams we're investing in at the moment. And that's how we foment change. And that's why banks are exciting in some respects. No one has told banks what creativity looks like yet, nor are we finished. We're not like media industries. We've all settled on one program guide. No one said what the right ways of banking rules for interaction are yet. It's one of the most exciting spaces I've ever been in. It's extraordinary.
Coming from Disney, that's a big statement.
Toughest customer base in the world, 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
You ask them their opinion, they really tell you. How to like it. It's hard. FinTech's lovely.
Yes.
I give it to you as a graph.
Especially in England,
Yeah,
where
we're so
everybody's very polite, right?
Really? Yes. Anyway.
All right, unless either of you want to add color, move on to the next question.
Yeah,
Okay.
by all means.
Cool. How can we get through to senior management who think that they have all the answers and won't be told otherwise? How can we affect change in this situation?
Ooh. You know what? They're humans too.
It goes back to empathy, like what you were saying earlier.
It goes back to empathy, and it goes back in helping them. I always talk about connection. It's all about connecting them to the customers. And while I absolutely agree that it's difficult to take the CEO or a managing director in a bank to the call center, you can bring the call center to them and you can sneak it into a meeting where they don't suspect that they're going to hear from the customer, and you make them listen to the most painful call that you could find in your archive of calls from customers. And you know what? The magic happens. So the tactic is irrelevant. Create that connection.
I think our UXers in the crowd are probably loving the anecdotal soundbite there.
It's true. I suppose you won't get anywhere until you convince the senior people that it's the right way to go. Like, let's be realistic here. There are some organisations where you won't hit that barrier, and unfortunately, not until they kind of leave or die. If I'm being really blunt, no, I'm being really honest. Will they change? So I think you have to try. You try to try and use these tactics and more to convince that group that there are other perspectives beyond theirs and beyond the boardroom that they need to listen to. And yeah, if you try and you don't get anywhere, then maybe try somewhere else. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, lightning round. One last question. How do you make sure the leadership isn't just going to meetings all day long?
Someone from Foolproof asked that about me. Yeah.
The pit bulls, right?
Yeah, the Rottweilers.
Yeah.
You are all the bosses of your own diary. Take charge. is nothing wrong with declining meetings. You'll know when you've got it wrong, someone will tell you. Because you kind of, why didn't I know that? I think create time for yourself. You manage your diary, govern it. My days start very early because I have colleagues in Hong Kong. Sometimes finish late, so I have colleagues in the US and various other parts. Create and partition your time so you can get things done. I'm notorious for drawing on windows and things behind me when I run out of notepaper because I'm on calls or meetings. You take charge. You don't let someone do it for you, and then negotiate.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think, if I'm being really honest again, in terms of the feedback around our kind of design leadership at Foolproof, the biggest thing that comes out is access to people. Mm-hmm. When we make people who are senior and experienced, full-time on projects, or don't give them the bandwidth to explore and direct their team, it really reflects on the team under them. So we work very hard to make sure that they self-manage, or at least create opportunities where that ad hoc conversation is needed when it's needed. Not, in 2 weeks on a Tuesday at 4:30, actually when it's needed, that giving that kind of actually timely feedback and direction or support, whatever it may be, whether that's pastoral or design, it's really important to create gaps to allow you to do that.
There's another one. Don't set meetings for an hour. Don't set them up for, break the pattern. 20 minutes, yes. 45 minutes. Nominate a chair, nominate a timekeeper, take charge, get around. Cut the small talk sometimes. You'll know about each other in most cases. You don't need to know how Fido is. Just crack on with the mission. You get out, you can do that at the coffee point later on. Just charge through.
And on the note on time, we are at it. Big takeaways include being empathetic, chicken wire, I love that. I'm never going to forget that story. Listening, and it's all about being human-centered. That's pretty much the big takeaway. Thank you so much. If you would join me.